Thank you. I do appreciate that you reserved your time here to hear my presentation. I'm here on behalf of a group of people who reserved their 4 years to create the first set of European arboricultural standards. What was it for? I would like to show you the idea and the procedure which we went through. You know very well that Europe is a pretty scattered part of the earth. We are very diverse. You can travel here 300 kilometers and pass 3-4 countries with completely different culture and different language. And even if we all within the arboricultural community know how to deal with trees, know how to prune them, plant them, we all do it correctly. After a few experience with a certification program, European Tree Worker, we distinguished that even if we all do it correctly, we do it differently. And the differences within countries were not really small. So 4 years ago, we started within a working group funded by European Arboricultural Council. We started a pilot project where we tried to get together people from various countries and start to really technically describe our work. Even if lots of countries within Europe have their own standards, Germany, Great Britain, Spain, but lots of those didn't have anything. And we wanted just to set up, let's say, the bar for the industry and try to get the best from experience around Europe within one set of rules. We wanted to create a discussion, but imagine that in one room was 20 people with different languages. We all communicated in English, which is no one's language. And, you know, to try to really express the thoughts and the experience and to be understood from the other side, that was a challenge. That was really a challenge for the start. So the pilot project was, in frank, about just, you know, proving that we are able to do that we really can produce something substantial. After that, we got support from European program Erasmus Plus for 3 years project, and we just started to work on the field that on one side we really wanted to set up rules which everyone will understand, which will not or which will comply with the national standards, but on the other hand which will include the differences, cultural, climatic, tree species differences, everything like that. The team started with experience from the Czech Republic because we did before a set of 13 industry standards where we, as a first attempt for our country, tried to set up a bar for a big variety of activities within arboriculture, within lightning protection, soil amendment, all these things. And the way how we set up the principle and the logic of development was the basic for the European standards, in fact. So our aim was this, and this project ended just a few weeks ago. And I'm really proud that the full group worked very, very hard, very intensive, and now the standards can be obtained, and I will show you later how and what you can expect there. So the partnership consisted of people from 12 countries. I will show you the team later on. We did a round of journeys around Europe in different countries. We really wanted to see what exactly means if I say, okay, planting of trees, what is the pit, how it looks like in Holland and in Latvia and whatever. So we really did lots of field work. We documented all of that. And all the members of the group did the best to contact people from their countries to be able to communicate their experience and to add to the generic knowledge. So I'll go with you through the standards now, through the main points maybe, and then you can of course ask questions if you wish. You know, this table is pretty funny because if I speak about language differences, the language is really differ. If you are from the States and don't understand people from Texas, that is nothing. It was really, really difficult. But on the other hand, when we started to release the standards, within first 3 months, we already had 6 languages for translation. So people are really keen to translate the texts, and they are now spreading throughout Europe. One thing which we are now solving with the translating parties is that they need quite often to invent new words in their language to describe what we need in the tree care, which is a very interesting process. So the standards have much more impact than we thought before. For the tree pruning, we of course followed the scheme which is in the ANSI standards in all, let's say, industry standards around the world. Of course, the basic rules don't change. We didn't want to, again, develop something just to be different. On the other hand, within the discussion, we came to various points where the industry already moves somewhere else slightly. One of the things is the description of the small technical details, which, for example, we test during our certification schemes. So we try to develop certain amount of tools to help people to understand properly what's the correct way of removing branches and whatnot. One quite large area which occurred within this discussion was change in approach to dead wood. You know very well that if within the arboriculture we say, okay, prune the tree, the first thing the guy does, removing the dead wood. That's very integral part of the arboriculture. On the other hand, you are very well aware that the need to support biodiversity and to increase the value of trees from the point of biodiversity is very, very important. And even if one small branch doesn't matter, the amount of branches being removed, it could be problematic, and within the cities, that's a real issue. So one of the things we really discussed quite a lot, and we slightly changed the way, was the approach to dead branches. Of course, we never want to compromise the demand for tree safety. So, of course, dead wood must be managed, but maybe not removed. I just used a picture from the United States. I think that's from the ANSI standards, where you already see that by removing the dead wood, the principle is to leave a small amount of the wood, because we are aware already that by removing the dead wood directly on the contact with the living wood can damage the branch color and doesn't have any sense. On the other hand, why not to extend it a bit? Why not to leave a stamp of that wood? It's in principle for the tree is the same, but for the biodiversity, if you take in account these great amounts of dead wood which are removed or retained, it could be different. So, you know, you feel that this is not something revolutionary. On the other hand, we are moving slightly to the point where we really to be compliant, for example, with the wet cert principle. You maybe heard a lecture by Vicky Bengtson, where, you know, the care for Asian trees or veteran trees mustn't start at the moment when the tree is veteran. We must just slowly go from the young trees to this stage and slowly adjust our ways how to perceive the tree. So the biodiversity impact is one of the pretty important part of the tree pruning strategy. The basic description of various methods of tree pruning was this matrix, where we tried to structuralize our approach to various parts of the crown of the tree from various reasons. So we divided the problematic to structural pruning, which occurs principally within the crown, the conflict resolution, which are interventions on the crown periphery, but not at the top. So it can be even symmetrization, or mostly it's some kind of conflict. Then we speak about biomechanical stabilization. A big discussion here was what is stabilization and what is tree topping. And of course you feel that this is an issue worldwide, and We need really to be very careful here. On the other hand, if we want to stabilize the tree, there is hardly any possibility then to just reduce the crown, lower the center of gravity, etc. So we just need these kinds of intervention. And of course, shaping. Shaping can be very variable. We really traveled to various countries with different historical development in that area, and I must say it was really fascinating when you see in Spain or in Belgium these huge trees, hundreds of years old, which are really chopped. It's not pruning. It's just historical way to harvest the wood from the crowns, and they still live. So it's really amazing, but you understand that the same techniques can be used, for example, for structural pruning on young trees. So we had to really diversify the approach to make it clear that interventions which on one part are proper, in other part are completely counterproductive. And of course, you see there that we divided the matrix even for the age groups of the trees, so from young trees to veteran trees. And that's a difference which was, I think, very important, because you see that the industry is really moving toward appreciation of all trees. They are not just mature trees after 100 years, they are completely different. And the approach really, really differs in many ways. So within the tree pruning, if you follow the principles from young trees to the veteran trees, you see that sometimes we use completely opposite techniques. For example, for young trees to reduce the top is nonsense. We never do that. With the veteran trees, it's pretty common, because the process of retrenchment, when the tree naturally loses the periphery of the crown and renew them in cycles, it's something the tree just goes through for next 1,000 years. So these differences are very important to understand them, not only based on reason of the pruning, but based on the stage the tree is in the development. For each of these boxes, we define separate set of rules in principle. So we tried really to be very instructive and to offer to the arborists clear rules how to do that and what to not to do. This was quite a discussion as well, but we decided at the end to put there not only the positive side, so how to do that, but the critical errors as well. So it's part of the text. Another very interesting issue with tree pruning is the perception of tree crown architecture. Probably you've heard the lectures from French authors, from Tom Joy, to appreciate the way that trees, mostly young trees, develop completely differently. The main leader, the apical dominance, or express the apical dominance. For the training of the young tree in the first stages, it's really very important that we just can't expect that all trees will just develop one strong leader and we will just support it, whatever. So this idea, even if it's still in first stages of appreciation within the industry, I really feel very important, and this is something which modifies our way to do the young tree pruning in comparison with tree planting procedure or the few years after the tree setup. This is what we try now to add to the standards, like set of short videos. To be very instructive, we at the moment feel that people are slightly moving from the reading of texts just to pictures. And we've got the experience that if something is not on YouTube, people don't know it. We really now try to take these, let's say, this informational basis and transfer it into short videos and offer to the arborists some information source which is maybe more updated than the standards itself. Tree cabling and bracing. That's, I think, the most different standard from ANSI standards. So for you who are from the States, I think this is the text which you really can read, and you will be probably sometimes surprised because the praxis in Europe and the States differs really. First important part is that we put quite a big stress on the fact that the tree cabling bracing is in fact the last option if we need to stabilize a tree. Because to put this artificial support in the crown always changes the way the tree just perceives the loads and changes the way how it reacts. So if there is any other way how to get our goal, either by target modification or by pruning, so we should go for these solutions first, and only when our tools don't suffice, we can move to other solutions. There you see that we have described all the ways of tree supports, from dynamic supports, which are, let's say, less invasive for the tree, down to the static bracing, propping, etc. And we tried really here to search through the experience from different countries. And I must say this was really fascinating for me, because some techniques which we used in past and we completely refused in our setup were widely used just a few hundred kilometers from us with great results. Yeah, and ways of crown stabilization with slats and stuff like that. It's just Czech way of stabilized trees, and in Germany, just as a country, it's not used at all. So, you know, these differences, and of course, I don't want to say that it's good or bad. It's just people are not used to that. They can't do it properly, probably. So the experience then is confused. So lots of things which can be drawn from the standards are here. Very interesting discussion was about where should we place the various kinds of stabilization systems, because even that was not entirely clear. In our setup, we strictly defined that within the dynamic part, only dynamic systems. Within the low third of the crown, measured from the defect, only static systems can be installed. But for example, in Spain, they use static systems with shock absorbers and, you know, all these strange combinations, which are very interesting. We just never tried that, yeah. But you are very well aware that with crown stabilization systems, you deal with very complex trees quite often, that they are not easy, just two weak forks, two branches. So we really need a variety of tools to be able to really do our job. An important part of the dynamic systems installation was the level of the slags, because it has 3 points. First is the material, because some materials change their elasticity or the length really due to the moisture condition. Some of the systems rely on shock absorbers rather than to material properties. So there are differences, but on the other hand, if the system is installed, it must be checked from the ground, because this is one of the basic inspections whether the system works or not. We must be able from the ground say, okay, the system is, you know, still dynamic, or the defect moves. So the rule about the slag is very important, not only for the installing party, but for the after check of the system as well. Quite interesting input was from our French partners, who used the dynamic systems not only as the producer said with the slide slag, but with really big slag, just to stop the falling of the branch. So they insist, and their experience is that even the normal dynamic systems influence the behavior of the crown, which is not always beneficial. So this is the installation which they propose to solve this problem. Yeah, and several very strange cases were described there as well. For the static crown stabilization systems, the principles which are used is much wider, because we can use the synthetic ropes, which in parts of Europe are not really used, because by the static system, which is pre-stressed, pretty always, these synthetic ropes start to grow in just at the time of installation, immediately, which is with the static systems can be problematic. But as a temporary solution, it's quite often used in many countries of Europe. This is the system where the iron ropes are installed on system of slats, which prevent the growing in for a certain time period. And of course the advantage is that you don't need to drill into the trees. It's not invasive for the first 10-15 years. It depends on the ground grade. Of course the most commonly used is the drilled system, which is, as you very well know, problematic if the tree has some fungal infection inside. So it's the question whether it is problematic or not. And of course many systems which are, let's say, used on individual basis. The rods which are installed under the defect in principle, under the weak fork in the healthy stem, just to support the area of the defect. Props is a big area, of course, with the veteran trees we use them quite a lot, etc. One of the very important parts of the system or of the standards is record keeping, because the big pain of all countries in Europe was that everyone states, okay, if you install this system, you must check it every year visually from the ground, and then it depends between 2 and 4 or 5 years as a climbing inspection. But there is no tool to get this data. So for the client, for the city, or for the private owner, it's impossible to keep the records, okay, when these systems were installed. And from our experience, we started to using the dynamic systems in 90s. So now we have hundreds and maybe thousands of trees only in our country with old systems which should have been already replaced, and no one knows about them. So one point which we did, we defined this need. So if you install, you are responsible for the system, and the installing party should keep these records. And second thing which we did, we created a free app which is called Shared Database of Stabilized Trees, and which enables to collect the data about installed systems, and can be used on various levels of, let's say, data sharing, because within Europe it's quite interesting that different countries perceive differently what's the level of data which they're happy to use with the industry or even with the client. You can set up your database to be completely closed and to be used only between the arborist and the client. So the level of usage of this data is up to the user. But the point is that you can really have a very quick overview where you have when installed your cabling bracing systems. The system has built in these warning flags to inform you when you should replace or check the system. And of course it keeps records of all checks which have been done in past. So if the tree fails, you can see who is guilty, really. Yeah, and of course, short video just to show you the variety. If you don't use, for example, the dynamic systems, so these are the most commonly used ones. Differences are in material, in the shock absorbers, and of course the effect on the tree strongly depends on the way how they are used. Within the project we did these instructional short videos and presentations. Just as I told you before, we had to show the partners what we mean exactly when we say, okay, system like this, and they never had the chance to see it. By the way, on this spot I must mention that this project ran through the COVID era. And I must tell you that was really terrible part, because we were stopped to travel, and within international project it's quite an issue. So we did quite a lot of these videos just to be able to communicate this story without meeting. Yeah, and last issue is the tree planting standard, which again was incredibly interesting. First version had something like almost 100 pages, which was monster. We then really did huge amount of work just to compressing it to a certain extent, which is readable. The main points are the space for trees, because this is pain of all cities, and many lectures here already discussed that. So we tried to put there reliable instructions how to deal with the space for trees. The main difference here with what we used before in our country was that there is definitely difference if the planting spot has connection with the underground water or not. So on this differs the size of the volume which the tree needs to grow. We try to describe the three scenarios for the most frequented types of planting spots in urban areas, and again each of these scenarios has its description. Deep discussion, which really was maybe the worst part of this standard, was on the tree stock quality. This is something which must definitely change for bigger part of the Europe. The point was not to fight with the nursery industry, because of course this is something which has a long history, and the approach to shape the trees to be pleasant for the customer is something which has high level of sophistication at the moment. On the other hand, lots of these techniques just go against the tree itself, because we force all the trees to grow with the strong apical dominance, even the species like Robinia or Gladicia, which don't do that. And if we prolongate these interventions within the nursery, we are getting tree which needs more time to adapt on the new site. So the overall experience is a bit against the trend of last years in arboriculture in Europe to plant bigger and bigger trees. So at this moment we propose, or we insist on the principle to plant trees, if possible, smaller. So maybe maximum 16, 18 centimeters. Plus minus, that's it, because then these problems of the trees start to be really, really essential. We have defined the quality for the nursery stock in three categories, because of course there is something like overall characteristics, but if I need tree for a park where the tree can develop plus minus freely, I can have even multistem or whatever, which is impossible, for example, for the road, what the trees is in the road. So there is a difference in the way what material I aim for, and of course, as I said before, the crown strategy is essential part of that decision-making process. Time of planting was divided into climatic zones, and then we, of course, described the technique of putting tree in the new position. Big amount of information is about the watering, water availability, and water retention for the tree. And of course, we tried, but only shortly, discuss these, let's say, advanced techniques, how to put trees in very different conditions, like the structural soils, etc. For the tree planting, I must say that the most instructional for our setup was really the very, very strong point that tree needs to be planted at the spot where it can develop, and the wrongly planted trees were again a problem which has been discussed here. And the second, that the quality of the tree stock is something we must insist on, and arborists are responsible for rejecting non-qualitative trees. I don't have too much time, so I'll go to the end of my speech. I just want to appreciate here the partners. standards are freely available. This is something we really wanted to do for the industry, because all the partners which were part of the project put their experience, their time, their knowledge into this project, and we insisted on the fact that we do it for the industry. So you can download the standards for free. They are being slowly translated into various languages. So at the moment we've got the tree pruning in 6 language variants. If any one of you wants to translate the standards, the copyright is for free. So just contact us. We will, because we issue 1 permit per language. So if you want to translate the standards, you can do that easily, and enjoy. We are really happy to get feedbacks from you. And maybe my last information, we got the support for following project, where we are creating 3 consulting standards. So standard of tree assessment, tree value calculation, and protection of trees during construction sites will follow within next 3 years. Thank you very much.